Um, but yeah, my podcast usually I go straight into it. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ayo Chill podcast, and welcome back to June in Jersey, the project that's going for 30 days. I have no idea how I'm doing it. If I'm speaking to future myself right now, I hope you have a cup of coffee and you're editing the crap out of everything that you're doing right now. Bless you. But today we have a very special guest for you today. We have Lou Scurti in the building. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the people, what you do, where you're from? You can go ahead.
Oh, my, that'll take an hour.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, Beto, well, can I call you Beto?
Yeah, of
okay,
course.
Beto, you know him as Luis Paza, and I met when he was a student at William Patterson University. And we were instrumentally being introduced to each other by his mother, God bless her, may she rest in peace. And Mariella was his biggest fan, okay, his biggest fan. And one day she said, I want you to meet my son, and it started that way. I was at William Patterson because I was the chaplain at William Patterson University. I ran the Catholic campus ministry, and I'm a priest. I'm retired priest, but I'm still a very active priest. I'm retired from, I always like to say, administration. That's so when you leave a room, you put out the lights to say, I don't care who you want to put out the lights, put them out. You don't want to put them out, don't put them out. I'm not paying the bills. It's kind of a selfish way of saying it, but I'm retired from administration, but I'm a very active priest. Had mass this morning, and I meet a few people afterwards. I'm here tonight. Later on, I'll be doing something else with other people. Love being a priest, and somewhere along the line, I was talking to Dr. Dempsey today, and she said, we were talking about backgrounds, how we got involved with different things, and I was at William Patterson University for 31 years.
Wow.
I was born there. And she gave a little history of how she started going on for her doctorate once she came to William Patterson, and the same thing happened to me. And we both met two different but very, very generous personalities, two different people. I met Lee Hummel. She was a faculty member in the English department, and she invited me to speak to her in her class one day. I forgot the subject. And I said, sure. I knew her very well. I worked on her son's hemophiliac league. We had a blood drive for Eric once a year, and I got very involved, and I got students involved, so we got close. So one day she said to me, after I spoke in her class, she said, I think you should go on for your PhD. At that point, I had 3 masters. I said, I don't know if I want to do that.
Wow, 3 masters.
Yeah.
And what are those 3 masters in?
One is liberal arts from Johns Hopkins University. I have an MA in fine arts from Towson State University. And I have an MDiv, which is a Master's of Divinity from St. Mary's Seminary in Baltimore. And the PhD is from Seton Hall University in marriage and family therapy. And just throw in that too, I also have an EDS, which is one step before the PhD from Seton Hall University. So
Nice. And then the EDS is also in
marriage and family therapy. It was like the stage before. It's a complete degree, but I wasn't settled with that, so I went for the PhD.
Yeah, of course.
So Lee said, and I had this great program for you in mind, and I said, where? She says, Seton Hall University. And we were in Wayne. That was a half hour away. I said, well, I don't know. It would suit you perfectly. Your personality, you work with families, because she knew at that point I already worked with kids and families. So I said, okay, I'll go try it. And sure enough, many years later, I got the degree and started practicing in Wyckoff with a friend of mine, Dr. Perenio. And she was a psychiatrist, and I was her therapist. She would refer to me when I would refer to her as needed. And that began in 2000. I got my degree. So I've been doing it for 22 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's fun.
And was therapy always like a part of your plan?
No, it was funny. Years ago, when I was chaplain at the university, I was Catholic campus minister. That was the title. At William Patterson. It was a great place. It's right next to Gate 1 of the university. It's very welcoming and opening and warm. And some of the priests in the local neighborhood would use the chapel for like a retreat with some of their students from their high school or grammar school. And one day I said to one of the guys who I thought very highly of, he was a chaplain at a local school, I said, listen, if you like this kind of stuff, working with young people, You know, when I finish a certain amount of years here, I'm going to be ready to go on to something else, retire, or another ministry. So I said, if you want to take over, work with me now, and then I'll just hand the reins to you. And he says, no, I have other plans. And I thought, that's funny. He never took the job or the invitation, but I had no plans. My only plan was to be at a university and be a chaplain at a university. Well, I also have a degree in fine arts, as I mentioned, so I started teaching on campus in the fine arts department. I taught in sociology, I taught in philosophy, and then it mushroomed into so many other areas, getting involved at the university. And from there, it continued to grow, but it grew in a natural way. It wasn't a plan. I mean, once I was in an academic program, the plan was to finish that degree. Yeah, okay. But the whole picture, where I was going, wasn't really a plan because I was doing what I loved. I was a priest. I was an artist. I was doing some counseling, but not formal counseling until I really got into the program, the therapy program, and so it just evolved. So was that my plan? No, but I'm very faithful, and I think my plan is not my plan. My plan is God's plan for me, and I just cooperated, and every door opened one after another, and I knew the Holy Spirit was guiding me to go fulfill myself, not on the backs of other people, but to fill myself by serving, and it came very naturally to me. So
Wow.
that was my plan.
No, that's great. That's great how it kind of falls through. I kind of want to take it back a little bit.
Go ahead.
I want to take it back. Are you originally from New Jersey?
I'm Jersey City, born and bred.
Really?
Yeah, Jersey City. But yes, I see. Before the pop words, diversity, integration, all that, I lived in a very diverse neighborhood.
Yeah, no.
Our next door neighbor was a family that was a 3-story home, and ours was 3-story. We lived next to black people on one side, the Latinos on the other, Italians across the street, and we played together as kids. So there was nothing unusual about that to me growing up. When you get a little old and you realize that these are political movements and sociological entities, I was already part of that, and it was very natural. So I didn't get involved with. I never participated in a march for this kind of rights, that kind of rights. I don't do that kind of stuff. I'm with the element that I feel most comfortable with, and that's people. So I don't care who they are. From Jersey City, and I guess my greatest influence there in Jersey City was my mother and father. But my mother was very involved with, we didn't call it ministry in those days, getting involved with charities associated with the parish, Holy Rosary Parish, Jersey City, 6th Street, give it a little plug. She was on service committee, altar committee, card party. I mean, everything you could imagine. She was a Girl Scout leader. She was on the faculty of my brother's high school, Ferris High School. She was on the not faculty, the Parent Teachers Association. Same thing with my school, St. Michael's. She was involved in every little charity you can imagine, and she was a full-time mother and domestic housekeeper. She was home. Mm-hmm. She obviously went outside a lot. When there was a need in the neighborhood, I like to tell people this story. When there was a need in the neighborhood, and we had poor people, we had middle-class people. Sometimes people's homes would burn, apartments would burn. My mother would be the first one in the neighborhood start getting a collection go, whether it's food, money, clothing, and she would facilitate service. I mean, these are words that I grew up in the seminary learning: service, charity, outreach. But she was doing it. So it was natural for us, my brother and I, to get involved with that kind of stuff. So when I went to Seton Hall as a student from high school, after graduating high school, I got involved with more service projects. And again, I didn't think I was doing anything great. I was doing what was natural for me, based on my family background.
And did you have any brothers or sisters growing up?
I have a brother, Michael. He's deceased. He has 2 wonderful children, Dr. Michael Scurti, who's right here in Boonton, and Mountain Lakes. He's a dentist. He has 2 children, Salvatore and little Michael. Love them dearly. Married to Karen. My my niece is my brother's daughter. She is Kim. Right now, as we speak, she's in Europe. She has two children: Sophia, who just graduated George Washington University, and Alec, who is a student at Seton Hall Prep.
Okay.
And she and her husband are, again, that's my family. I mean, that's my family. And never forget when my brother passed. It was very difficult for all of us. He wasn't that old. I thanked him during my homily. That's the sermon at his funeral, for giving me them as my family, because with my sister-in-law, they've raised beautiful kids that are very, very conscientious kids too. So that's my family. Jersey City, Holy Rosary Grammar School, St. Michael's High School, and then from there, Seton Hall.
And you were saying that you were involved as you kind of got older, you got more into service. So what was like the first big kind of service thing you did? Because I remember, I'll never forget funny enough, a lot of people when I was like growing up doing like CCD.
Yeah.
Because I grew up with all that. My mom put me in classes and stuff. And, I remember I got to do like the altar boy stuff for a little bit. And for a while, and it's funny, I went to, in kindergarten, no, actually pre-K, I went to a nun daycare in Patterson. And I forget what the daycare is called, but it's right next to John F. Kennedy High School. And religion was always a big part of growing up for me. And I think it was basically because my mom had grew up in Peru through the religious system they have over there, private schools. But her nuns would hit her with the ruler and stuff,
I never got it.
My nuns were always really cool. I mean, they'd get angry sometimes, but I don't think I could remember anything bad they ever did. But funny enough, they always thought that I was going to be a priest or something like that, because I loved talking so much when I was little.
Time.
You never know. But I always loved talking, and I was kind of almost like preaching to the crowd too, because I mean that's basically what I'm doing now. You do. But yeah, I remember one of my big first things. I was an altar boy for a little bit, and I had done the carrying the stuff up into the front, and the candles and everything. Right. So do you remember your first time doing anything like that?
I was raised in the church. We lived on 4th. Church was on 6th. So, and last week, I was up at Villa Walsh. Now, Villa Walsh is the mother house, headquarters, you guys like to say, of the Filippini sisters. Okay, Filippinis are named after Saint Lucy Filippini. It's an Italian order that started 300 years ago. And they came to the United States to teach primarily in Italian ethnic schools throughout the country. So I was raised by the Filippini sisters. I mean, we walked to their convent and I walked to school, so everything was close. So they got me involved with everything. I mean, we were talking about sister last week, one of the sisters, Sister Angelina, Sister Carmela, they used to bring me in on Saturday with a few buddies, and we'd clean the convent, the driveway, we'd spruce up, we'd carry trash, we'd fix up the school, we'd help the boards. And it was all very natural to do that. That was home. I mean, and they always fed you. The Italian nuns always fed us, so we always got fed at the end of the day. But we did that right through the 8 years of grammar school. Got involved with everything. I mean, charities, of course, the obvious ones: food collection, clothing collection, but always centered from the parish, because we all knew each other, and we weren't all Italian in the parish, but we were Italo-Americans, and my grandparents lived 2 blocks on each side, so I grew up with my grandparents.
That's great. No, that's great. So do you remember the first time you were kind of said, I'm going to be a priest? Was there a certain moment that hit you, or was there an event or anything?
Well, that's a common question for me and probably other guys. I served as an altar boy at the parish, and then when that stopped, I went to high school, and then I came back to the parish on weekends and during the week, but as a reader, because at that point Vatican II had hit, and I wasn't an altar boy anymore because I was too old, so I became a lector in church, which is reading the scriptures and making announcements. I like that. I like the feeling. And Father Santoro, one of my role models, often said, "Hey, Lou, you like this? You come up to seminary sometime. I'll show you around." Nah, I don't want to do that. I didn't want to do that because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Nothing sunk in. I just liked doing everything. I was an artist. I was playing. I was making art, sculpture. There were a lot of other things. So the church was very influential in my life, but it was naturally influential. It was close by. If I needed anything, I know I could go to the priest. And I tell somebody recently, I always had, now I'm a therapist. In a sense, I always had a therapist in my life. And they weren't formal therapists, but they were the priests and the sisters in my parish. When I went to Seton Hall, the place is filled with priests, and there was always a guy there who was my spiritual director. When I went to the seminary, you definitely had a spiritual director. So I've always had someone with whom I could bounce off ideas, challenge me to grow, encourage me in certain areas of life. And so going into therapy many years later, it was a natural leap. But thinking about becoming a priest, went in and out during my senior year, and I was I was always in trouble in my senior year. Last week we were at the Museum of New York in on East Central Park, okay, off 67th Street, and the Museum of the City of New York, and there was an exhibit there about articles that had appeared through the years in Time magazine, and sayings that came out of those articles, like things like remember some of them, things that we use commonly, like email first came up in articles in Time magazine, and one of the posters was troublemaker, and I said, that's what they used to call me in school. So I have a picture of me under that sign that says troublemaker. Because in high school, I loved high school. I loved the kids and friends. And, thank God I was a good student. But I was always in trouble. I always did something a little bit edgy. And not it felt natural to do that too.
Yeah, high school's the time to do all that stuff.
Yeah. Right? So one day, I don't know what, there were incidents every day, I should say. There was one incident in which the principal yelled at me for doing something. I don't know what I was doing, but she had me in her office and she's yelling and yelling. Now I'm a senior, like maybe April, May, so you're going to graduate. And she says, Scurti, she says, what do you think you're going to be when you get out of school? So I said, I'm going to really give it to this lady. I said, I knew this would bother her. I said, I'm going to be a priest. She went berserk, really berserk. The veil flew off her head. She says, get out of here. She says, if they ever accepted you, they'd have to be scraping the bottom of the barrel. So I laughed. I went to my homeroom nun, and I told her that. And she was a very serious nun that wanted her students to get into college and good colleges. So the following week or two, I got a letter from Seton Hall University. You're hereby accepted to Seton Hall University. I had checked off divinity, which was a study of theology before going to a seminary. So they accepted me. So I brought it into Sister Marita. And I said, Sister, I got an acceptance to Seton Hall. She says, go tell the principal. I says, the principal doesn't like me. She says, go tell the principal. I said, she's not going to be happy with it. She says, go tell her. So I had the letter in my hand, and I knocked on her door. Very friendly lady. She says, what do you want, Scurti? And I said, they're scraping bottom. And believe it or not, that was it. That was the trajectory by which I started studying to become a priest.
So I actually didn't even know, you could actually go to, I actually don't even think I know the process of becoming a priest. So how does that even start with?
Okay. It's very parallel to any advanced degree, but you go to college and major in something. I majored in theology and philosophy. Then at the end of college,
and just to make sure I know, theology is the
study of God.
Okay,
study of God. Mm-hmm. Anything to do with God. So we studied Bible, Scripture, moral theology, ethics, everything to do with how a person lives in relationship to his understanding of God. And then during the course of that, I applied to seminary, accepted at one seminary. I eventually switched out of that one.
And a seminary is
Okay, seminary. The word comes from semine, which is seed. So it's the seed organization by which you are learning to grow in the faith. And it specializes in guys, it's only men. And it was in Darlington. I stayed there 2 years, and then I moved to St. Mary's Seminary in Baltimore, from which I got ordained. In the course of those years, you did ministry. You did, especially we call it field ministry. I worked at a hospital as an orderly. I worked as an orderly, like carrying dead bodies, or meeting the needs of the nurses, So I took that job because I wanted to be around hospital people. I didn't choose that as a specialty. After that experience, I didn't like it. I loved working there. I loved the people, but it was very heart-rending. I was also an undertaker for a while, not as a ministry, but it was something to do. Then I started teaching. Loved teaching. I taught at an all-girls school, and it was just fantastic. It was Notre Dame school. It's probably closed now, but I still keep in contact with some of those girls who are now women, and I was Mr. Scurti there, and it was a great experience. I taught French, language arts, and smatterings of religion because I was a layman. I was a person. I had left the seminary at that point. Okay, I was in between leaving, so I was, just a normal student. I wasn't a priest. I wasn't a seminarian.
and how long does it take in the seminary to actually become a priest?
From start to finish, 4 years college, 4 years seminary.
Okay.
And during that last year of the seminary is a service year. We call it diaconate. Diaconate is an old Greek word that means service. And it's actually one of the steps you are ordained to before you become a priest. Ordination is the process by which the bishop puts his hands on your head and the Holy Spirit makes you a priest or a deacon. Okay? So when I was teaching, I realized I really liked teaching. And the faculty was wonderful. And every once in a while, they would ask me to do something in the religious vein, like run a retreat. And they knew I was interested, and I did. At the end of that year, I applied to St. Mary's Seminary, and I said, I want to give this a really serious shot. And I went to St. Mary's Seminary and got my advanced degrees there, and it was great. And even there, when I was working at a hospital. I worked in a parish, and in the parish, I did everything. I taught Bible study. I taught adults who were preparing their kids for baptism. I taught confirmation classes, and you were in those.
Yeah.
And so it was a great experience. And again, it really went to my heart to teach. So when the time came for me to go be ordained and go back to my diocese, I had 6 months to finish my degree from Johns Hopkins. So I asked my bishop if I could be ordained in December, not May, when most of the guys left. And like June would be the graduation. This was May. They used to get ordained. So he said yes. So I stayed there 6 more months, finished my degree, and came back to Jersey to serve. And the first job I wanted was, as a priest, to be a teacher. So I spoke to the bishop, and eventually he put me, once I was ordained December 8th, 1973. He put me into DePaul High School in Wayne, New Jersey, and I taught there for 5 years. And then I went to William-Patterson.
That's great.
Yeah.
So can you tell me how is it, like, the ceremony is for being ordained?
Oh my God, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. First of all, when I grew up in Jersey City, I knew seminarians because there were a lot of us. As a matter of fact, we had in my parish guys who students became seminarians, became priests, also became bishops. Bishop Tommy Donato, who passed away a few years ago, and a few other guys became bishops because God wanted them to be bishops. Basically, that's it. And it's a great experience to be in the seminary, although because the advantages, the learning, the education, and all that. But I didn't like it. I didn't like the structure. I was always a little bit on the outskirts of that. Thank God I had a very wise spiritual director who used to bring me back. I mean, I never did anything how can I say, immoral, and crazy. But I didn't follow the rules. Troublemaker went with me. I should wear that on my shirt. Troublemaker. But in the course of that time, you got to go to you got to go to ordinations, both when I was in grammar school, and high school, and the seminary. But I tell you one little story about being in grammar school. Christmas and Easter were big holidays in the Catholic Church. So the seminarians, these are guys who are now in the seminary, they're from the parish, would come home and they would help out for the services, Mass and the celebrations of Mass, retreats, and so on. And I remember Tommy Donato and other guys would dress us. We would get dressed with the white alv, it's called a surplice, and under that was a black or red cassock outfit. And then that we would put bows on for the holidays. So I remember these guys coming over and straightening up our bows. And that was my first contact with someone I grew up with because they were in my neighborhood who is now in the seminary, ready to be ordained and having been ordained. So when they got ordained, I would go. Very magnificent spiritual event, the music, the prayers, the humility of the guys going forward, asking the bishop to ordain them. Very, very beautiful. The ceremony is beautiful. A lot of symbolism. For instance, one symbol is our hands are anointed. They're anointed with chrism. Just thinking of it brings me back many years. They're anointed with chrism because our hands are going to be doing special things, which as Catholics, we consecrate bread into the body of Christ, the wine into the blood of Christ. We anoint people who are dying. We bless people. We baptize people. And to see each of those areas of the symbolism being applied to the guys that I knew growing up, it's just inspired you to go forward, inspired me to go forward.
And how old were you at this point?
In my 20s. I got ordained in 1973. I was probably 25, 26, and I'm bad with numbers. I'm going to be ordained 50 years next year. So somebody can do the math about that.
So you were talking about them putting the
the chrism.
The chrism, yes.
In the Catholic Church, there are 3 oils that we use. One is chrism. One is oil of catechumens, which is someone coming into the church brand new. Babies get that. Babies also get chrism, and the oil of anointing of the sick. Yes. Okay, so those we're very familiar with. So the ceremony is magnificent. I mean, and you just picture yourself someday there, and that's what happened to me. And then the magnificence of it wears off, and the ordinary kicks in. And then you go about your business. You go about your business in school, academics, teaching, and the rest.
And how were your parents feeling about this at the time? What was your family's reaction? What was your brother's reaction?
My brother was okay. I'll give you a story about Jersey City. Growing up, like I said, it was an ethnically diverse community. Easter, Christmas, and September, my mother would take us on the Avenue. This is Newark Avenue, to buy shoes. Of course, the suits and all that stuff came with it, but shoes, okay, specifically. And we would go to Jaime's Shoemaker on Newark Avenue, Newark and Brunswick, and Jaime had a great store, tons of shoes all over the walls, wooden floors that you had that oil smell because he used to clean it that way, and a potbelly stove in the corner. So I can still remember it and smell it. Wonderful guy. So he would say, Michael, Louie, what are you going to be when you grow up? So I said, I don't know. My mother said, one's going to be a priest and one's going to be a fighter. And sure enough, one became a priest and one became a fighter. Not professionally, but by personality. Yeah. And he was a strong person. So when I told them that I had got accepted at Seton Hall, that was okay. Like they knew I was in the program. But when I was accepted to the seminary, then it got serious. My grandparents were both sides, fathers and mothers, were very religious. So my grandmother would go to church every day, and when I was small, so this had to be, maybe less than first grade, I would meet her outside on the stoop. She'd walk by, I'd be out there before 7 o'clock, and we'd go to church together. So I went to church as a little kid, not really knowing what was going on, but Grandma liked it and I liked it, and we used to go to her house for coffee and cake afterwards. So I was there. I was in.
Yeah.
While I was doing that, Mike was probably gambling or playing in the other games or whatever. So when I told them, okay, it was a Sunday, I had just received the formal letter of acceptance to the seminary. I said, we want to be low key. It wasn't a high and mighty family. I told my mother first before we ate. She's okay. She's mentioned to Dad at dinner. At dinner on Sunday was 12 o'clock. Pasta, meatballs, all the stuff, roast, all that stuff. And it was the four of us, my brother, my father, my mother. And I said, oh, I just got the letter from Seton Hall that they accepted me at the seminary. And my father said, what do you mean? My mother says, he wants to become a priest. My father said, really? And I said, yeah. He said, whatever you want, we're supporting you. Then he said to the family, the following Sunday, now at that meal, this following Sunday was my grandmother, my uncle, my father's brother, all of us, and maybe one or two other relatives. And before we actually ate, my father put down his fork, and when my father put down his fork, everything stopped because he was a very serious eater. He put down his fork. He said, before we eat, I got something to tell everybody. I said, what is it? He said, Louis going to seminary. That means we're all going to church every week from now on. And we continued to meet. And they weren't churchgoers. I mean, my mother helped out and volunteered in church every day, but she wasn't a regular Sunday churchgoer. And what was happening in those years in the church is evening masses were brought in, Sunday evening masses. My mother started going to Sunday evening mass. She never went to church. I mean, I shouldn't say never, but probably Christmas and Easter, but didn't go on a regular basis. Why? Because Sunday was cooking day. We're Italian, so we got to eat. So she was at home cooking. And my father, that's it, started. And we all started going to church.
That's great.
Every day. Now, my brother and I used to go to church. I got to tell you a story about my father. My brother and I used to go to church because they would, we were in Catholic school. Sunday, you got dressed, you went to church. My father didn't go, my mother didn't go, but they sent us, which regrettably is a kind of Catholic tradition. I hope is changing. I hope all families go. But anyway, one day my brother and I are in church together. Now we're 3 years apart, so both grammar school, and we're playing, we're fighting, we're grabbing things back, and who knows what maybe it was the money for the donation.
Yeah.
And I could still see myself handing things back to my brother, him pulling it from me. And in between us came the biggest hand I have ever seen in my life. And it was my father's hand. And he gave one smack this way, one smack that way. And I didn't know it was my father until well after it happened, because I was afraid to move. I didn't know who it was. It was my father. We were kibitzing in church, and he stopped it. And I realized he used to come and watch us in church, so he was there.
Yeah.
So, but it was, the family didn't got like cuckoo crazy about, oh, he's going to be a priest, he's holy and all that. It was still Louis, It was still Louis, and I have a Sicilian background and a Abruzzi background. The Abruzzese background were very Catholic. They always went to church. My grandfather and my grandmother all went to church. My grandmother on my Sicilian side would go, like my mother, for occasions. And one day my grandmother told me, she said, you want to be a priest? That's all right with me, Louis, but in Italy, we call the priests the cockroaches. I said, what? We called them cockroaches because they had the black vestments and they used to walk around and bother people. They probably weren't bothering people so much as asking for donations.
Yeah.
So it's just, but if you want to become a priest, I'll be there. And so my family, all this to say, my family was very supportive. It was, my father said it all. Whatever you want to do, we're behind you.
So, do you remember the first time you ever gave a sermon as a priest?
Yes, it was my first mass. Okay, so what happens is you get ordained, and you get ordained at the cathedral usually. I got ordained at the parish I was serving in Morristown, St. Margaret's in Morristown, and there were just two of us because I extended my year because I was studying. So two of us got ordained, and that was my first mass as a priest. But the bishop is really saying the mass. You're concelebrating. Okay, the next day is your first mass, and everybody comes to that. Like the church was packed, the family, friends, the parishioners. I mean, tons of people. That was my first mass, and I have great. My mother was very. How can I say? She was very aware of a direction we should go in as people putting ourselves on the line. So she treated that event, the first mass and the dinner afterwards, almost as if it was a wedding. We got to do it the right way. Eventually, Michael got married, and we did a wedding. Louis got ordained, and we're going to do a feast. So the mass was packed with people. We had busloads coming in from South Jersey, my cousin, and it was very special. The choir was Syrian. They were Catholics from St. Anne's Melkite Church in West Paterson. I was friends with the priests there, and I loved their music and I loved their services. But they're Eastern, they're not Western like Roman Catholics. But we celebrate together. So they were there, and their music is outstanding. And I always tell people I felt like I should be riding into church on an elephant because it was like, with the tambourines and the little bells. It was wonderful. So that was my first mass. And my first homily, I used to have notes in my hand because you practice giving your homily, your sermon, when you're a deacon, you practice. So I had notes. Basically, I knew what I wanted to say. It took a lot to condense it because obviously you can tell I can talk.
Yeah.
And it was maybe 10, 15 minutes, okay, which is typical for me for in a sermon. And yes, I do remember what I said. I don't remember what I said. Don't remember. I don't have a audio recording of it.
Were you like nervous to go up there, or was it kind of at this point kind of like natural? Because at this point you're already kind of teaching a little bit, right?
Yeah, I'm teaching, but this is different. I still get excited / nervous before every mass. It's not teaching. You're not teaching. You're doing something that connects people to God and God to people, and that's tough. You got to be ready and humble. I'm not a humble person, but in those minutes I am, because they see the priest, and that's how they connect with God. So if you're a jerk, that's what God is. I know that. I sat in churches when I would come home during the summers, and I would just be so upset with some of the things the priest would say. I would just get up and leave. My mother would get nervous. You can't leave church. I said, I can't sit here and listen to that. It's garbage, And then I would find a church. As a matter of fact, in Jersey City, the church I found, besides my home parish, where the guys were really good, was St. Peter's Prep. It was a high school, Jesuit high school.
Yeah.
I used to go to their churches for Sunday Mass, sometimes weekday Mass. So yes, I was nervous then. But I never lost, how can I say, I never stagnated. I never got quiet. I never had a loss for words because I knew basically I was prepared. And I knew the Mass was for me and my family and all these people who knew me since I was a little boy. So these people, I had people who were like much, much, much older than me and my grandparents' age, and they were there. My cousins from South Jersey, my cousins from Jersey, they were all there. And I'm sort of a show-off. I wouldn't let myself do a bad job, okay? And I'm still that way. Mm-hmm. I won't do a bad job. If I am going to talk about something, I want to know what I'm talking about. And if I don't know it, I'll say I don't know. You know. But when I got up there to preach the first Mass, I have pictures of it because my mother had made an album, like a wedding album. I don't remember the exact words, but I do remember that it was a wonderful experience because that was the first time I was the celebrant, you know, not celebrating with the bishop. I was the This was my Mass, and it was shaky. It was really shaky. But I had good support around me. I had my pastor, I had my spiritual director, I had priests that served in the parish. So we had like 25 guys in the sanctuary with me. They were all priests who knew me well. And no, it was great. It was a great experience. And one of the nicest things I remember, when I was on retreat. Now, a retreat is time you take a week, 2 weeks to reflect, pray, and we did that as seminarians. We did it often, but the Diaconate Retreat was a year. I'm being ordained a deacon. We went to West End, New Jersey, St. Alphonsus Retreat House, and there were like 25 of us. And in between the sessions, the prayer sessions, whatever, went into town. So I went into town. I guess a PS to that is priests usually get a chalice for their first Mass, and they keep it. That's their chalice. I have many, but there's one chalice, is that one, the first chalice. So John Dux and I walked into town, and I like to go to junk shops, antique shops, and he did too. And so we walked into town, and I found this cup. It was a loving cup, beautiful. It was silver. It was tarnished, and it had olive leaves around it, and a beautiful base. And I said, I like this. I said, if I mount this on a larger base, I'll make this my chalice. Going back to my ancestry roots of Sicily and Italy with the olive branches and the olive groves, and the memories are all there. I said, oh, okay. So I said to John, I don't have the money for this. And it was $50. I said, I don't have the money for this. I can't buy it. He said, no, I'll lend you the money. I said, no, I don't borrow money. I'm not gonna borrow money. If it's here next time I come, I'll get it. He says, Louis, if you don't get it, I'm gonna buy it for me. I said, okay, let me $50. So I got that. We brought it to a place in Baltimore, John Hepfeld, I forgot his first name. He was a silver maker. He was a silversmith. Brought it to him, told him what I wanted to base. And he looks at this, he says, do you realize what you have here? I says, no. He says, you have an antique. And he researched it for me. It was made in 1850 in France, and it was signed by Thomas Bloom from, excuse me, I said France, Thomas Bloom in Germany. And he traced it back, and he says, this is a loving cup. He says, there aren't too many of it, and this is all handmade, because he could tell by the way the leaves were carved around the rim.
And the loving cup is specifically like...
Well, a loving cup is like something you win at like a trophy.
Okay.
Like when a horse race. Okay. So this was European loving cup, but it was copper, silvered, and it had a separate cup inside, and you could take the whole thing apart. I said, wow. And he unscrewed the base and showed me, the manufacturer, he said where it was made, and so we had it mounted on a higher pedestal, so when I raised it, people could see it. He had it silvered, and the funny part, and it's beautiful. It's over 100 years old, and it's very precious. So I contact my mother. I called. I said, Ma, I found my chalice, the one I want to use as my chalice. She says, oh, great. She says, what's it look like? I said, well, it's being fixed. What do you mean fixed? I said, well, it's tarnished. You're not buying an old thing, all right? Because my mother had no appreciation for antiques. It was junk. If it was old, it was junk. So I said, well, it is old. It's from Hildesheim, Germany. Hildesheim, Germany. And Louis Hupfeld, the silver maker in Baltimore, is going to make it look nice. She says, how much is it going to cost us? I said, $50. She said, why don't you just go get one with jewels in it and diamonds in it, like the other priests have. I said, no, I don't really want that. I said, this is what I want. Because $50. She sent me the 50, and I still have the receipt from the back for a bank card She wrote on the bank card, which is from one of the Jersey City banks, it better be worth it for this much money, $50. And I had that laminated, and that's in the box with the chalice. So whenever I see the chalice, I think of my parents who paid for it. But it's very precious. And the picture I have, as you said, do I remember the mass? Is mom and dad bringing that up in procession. It was brought up with the wine and the bread for communion in the procession of my first mass. So that's a great picture. And we still have that framed because it's a great picture, great memory.
Yeah, no, that's all great. So, how did you get into? So now you're a priest, and so you still decided to study during when your first couple of years because you have three masters. I mean,
I didn't stop studying until 2000. 2000. I mean, I still study because you got to do credits and CEUs. I stayed in Baltimore to finish the master's at Johns Hopkins. When I came back to Jersey, I was teaching at DePaul High School. I started my master's at Montclair State University for Fine Arts. Continued that, and I already had the MDiv from the seminary. And then, as I mentioned before, when I met Dr. Hummel at William Patterson, she's the one who encouraged me to go on for the doctorate. But I was at William Patterson as campus minister with only 3 master's degrees. And with her encouragement, I got the EDS and then the PhD. So I never stopped studying. And my whole life has been scholastic. In other words, my year is scholastic. It always has been. I mean, always, which means I go to, I'm busy September through June, but I take Christmas break and I take Easter break. But that's natural for someone in school and someone in the church. Summer, I always have off summers, So I got into my education as teaching experience with that in mind. I'll always maintain my academic year, my academic social life. Well, that got into a little conflict when, because that included an academic year, you have Thanksgiving and you have Friday and the weekend off. I mean, they have academic year, all the normal things that any student in the United States experiences. I had those holidays, but they were natural for me. That's what I do. So I was doing my internship as a marriage and family therapist. So I went to the director, and this was well before getting the doctorate, because then the year of final study came. So I went to my director and I said, "Oh, in 2 weeks is Thanksgiving weekend. Just so you know, I won't be here Friday. But Saturday we weren't there anyway." He said, "No, you have to be here Friday." I said, "No, you missed what I said. I won't be here Friday because it's Thanksgiving weekend, and we have family coming in, and we have things planned for the whole weekend, so I can't come to work." "Lou, this is not work. This is your internship. You have to be here." I says, "No, I can't be here." He said, "Are you quitting?" I says, "No, I'm not quitting." I said, "I'll be back Monday, but I'm not quitting." He says, "You could be fired." I said, "Well, if you have to do that, fire me. I'll go get an internship someplace else, because internships are, wonderful experiences, and there were plenty of that I could have gone to." He calls me in the end of the day. He said, "I thought about your tradition," because I explained, I've always been academic. He's like, "Yeah, I understand your tradition, and you Italians do everything as a family."
Yeah.
He said, "So take Friday off." I said, "Okay, thank you. But you're not going to get paid." I didn't get paid anything. I got like $5 a day. So I said, "Don't worry about it. No choking up." So I don't know. I forgot what your question, but I answered it more than enough.
No. I think it's great. I think we're getting to a great area. I'm trying to think. So when did you decide that therapy was something that you wanted to get into? Because I mean, I assume like there's a lot of parallels between like a priest and then like someone who does do therapy as well. And it interests me as well because you also talk about how you went into philosophy. And I feel like it's not for nothing. I feel like a lot of people who are in philosophy who I've met aren't necessarily religious. I feel like sometimes you could go a very, very
Sure.
atheist way. I
And be philosophy. Yeah,
yeah, and be really into philosophy. So I'm kind of interested in see like how that all mixes up.
Okay, there's a few things there going. First of all, in the Catholic Church, we are very honored by medieval philosophy, and created by Thomas Aquinas and famous people like that, from Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, and theologians who philosophers who became theologians right to the 21st century. Our philosophy is, as a belief system, is theology grows on philosophy. And how we say that in clear parlance is faith is built on nature. Philosophy, Socrates, Aristotle, was given to us by the natural thinking of great men of history. Okay? When Christianity came on the scene, Christianity took philosophy and everything. Don't forget the dichotomy of body and soul. That's Aristotelian. The idea of people having souls, eternal life. That's Greek philosophy. I think of Plato, who talked about trying to explain his experience. Talked about this cave. People going into the cave and there's light coming from the cave, and they see their shadow on the wall. And he made a parallel that's like your soul. It's you, but it's not in you. And he's trying to explain this in the analogy of the cave, we call it. Well, Catholic theology was built on that because the great early Catholic theologians were philosophers. And then Christianity comes on the scene, and they incorporate the richness of God becoming man and giving us his spirit into philosophy, and then you have the birth of theology. And what we believe as Catholics is God is one. It's only God. God has sent us emanations of himself, you might say. He created all things, and he had, from the beginning of eternity, with him his Son and his Spirit. Now, it wasn't a biological son. It was God as we understand him to be, and as explained through the scriptures eventually. And he sends his Son to earth to be one of us. So we as people can learn how to get to eternal life, to positive eternal life. And I think everything about Christianity is positive, hope-filled, and directed toward the light, the eternal light, which is God. So when Jesus, the Son of God, becomes a human being, we call that Christmas, he gathers people around him to teach him how to live and profit from this life so you really enjoy it, really get into life and enjoy it without extraneous stuff. I mean, without excess in any direction. When Jesus, is nailed to the cross, he does something that really seals his ministry. He conquers the only thing that no one has ever conquered, death. He comes back from the dead and sends us his Spirit. And I like to say the Spirit of God is like God kissing us. You don't see it, but you know when you have it. You know when you have love. And he leaves the earth, he joins the Father in eternal life, and he sends the church, people who gathered in his name, his Spirit to carry on that ministry that he started. And we know the ministry. We know the four Gospels. We know the Scriptures. Basically, love one another as I love you. Do unto others. That's the ministry. Love, forgive, carry on. Be good to one another. That's why Ukraine right now tears the world apart. That's a perfect example of the opposite of what love is all about and what Christianity is all about. So that was the root. So now we have philosophy and theology. Now, in theology, you learn all the particulars of theology. So you learn scripture. That's one part of theology. You learn ethics, how to live in society. You learn morality, how to behave in a society, pro, con, people, good people, bad people. So our theology is built on nature. So without philosophy and the abstract thinking that philosophy challenges us to understand, theology wouldn't be as strong. But because of theology and philosophy marrying each other, in a sense, the church says faith is built on nature. So Theology is built on philosophy, and sometimes they call them the sister sciences, philosophy and theology. So that has affected me a great deal, and in a positive way, because when I'm in therapy or when I'm preaching, different approaches. The word for therapy comes from the word for healing. So when I preach, I hope, grace of God, that I'm healing. And when I'm in therapy with people, I hope I'm working toward their healing. I'm not doing the healing, I'm directing, and the healing stays with them. So I tell especially couples, I said, we'll start in session, but the homework begins when you leave, because that's where you have to put together what you're learning in session through answers and questions and examples and analogies.
Is it hard to separate the two worlds from being a therapist and doing therapy, and then also wanting to implement, God into people's lives as well? Because I feel like, if I was talking, directly to, a priest, I could even remember when I was little asking for advice, like, oh, hey, like little Jimmy's bullying me and stuff. And, they always go back to the scriptures and they'll be like, oh, well, this has happened. And give me an example of something that happened in Jesus' life and how I could apply it. But that doesn't necessarily work with everything in therapy, does it? Because you're not necessarily having people who are religious people,
Right.
or they might be of different religions,
Right.
or some of them might even be, like atheists or anything like
Right.
that.
Right.
So is it easy separating the two, or do you ever pull in from the two?
Right off the bat, it's not easy, okay? But right off the bat, my website and my introduction to anybody, whether you want to learn about me online or referred to me by another person or another doctor or the insurance company, right off the bat, I make no bones about that I'm a Catholic priest. I'm an ordained Catholic priest. However, in the context of my license, I'm a licensed by New Jersey and Florida marriage and family therapist. In that context, I operate with my license with all of the guidelines of that I've learned and more than I'm learning of family therapy techniques, different philosophers, different therapists, and so on. Everybody knows I'm a Catholic priest. Sometimes they'll come in and say, "Oh, you're a Catholic. I can't talk to you." And I said, "Why?" Because go something hot. I had an abortion. Okay, okay. You want to talk about it? What do you mean you want to talk about it? Well, you just told me you had an abortion. You brought it up, but it must be important for you. But you're a priest. Yes. You don't allow that. It's not me who don't allow it. God doesn't allow it, but that's another story. I said, you're here now, and I'm here as your, use the word therapy, healer. Let's talk about it. So there's no topic that I shun, that I stay away from. Okay? If a person comes into therapy or religious counseling, but okay, we'll keep this separate. I'll talk about whatever they want to talk about. And I tell them, this is your hour, whatever you want to talk about. You want to talk about, you went shopping last week? We'll talk about shopping, okay? Because it's therapy. It's the therapeutic alliance. It's trust. It's building rapport. And my bottom line is dignity. I respect the dignity of every person who comes into my office. And someone asked me, not recently, last week, she said, "Oh, I know you're a priest. Would you pray for me?" I says, "I pray for all my clients. I mean, I have a lot of clients. I pray for all of them daily. I don't ruminate about them. I don't think through their problems every day, but I pray for them and their intentions and their healing, because people come to therapy for healing. So I'll deal with any topic, okay? Now, I won't preach what I don't believe in as a priest in church. I won't preach what I don't believe in, and nor will I preach in therapy. So I preach my faith and what I believe in God, and how I believe the church has educated me and worked with me to preach the word of God. And in therapy, if they want to tap into my religious background, my theology, go right ahead. I'm an open book. You want to talk about art? I'll talk about art. You want to talk about God? Talk about God. You want to talk about the conflict between husband and wife, children and parents? We'll talk about that.
Do you think that any priest could do what you're doing and be as open minded as you are?
I think ministry is a gift, and the gift comes from the Holy Spirit. And besides praying for my clients, I also pray for myself at the beginning of every session because I have to make sure that I am respecting the person made in the image of God in front of me. Now, I've had people who are trans, I've had gay, straight, people in various kind of intimate relationships, and I'll work with them. I'm not gonna, like I said before, I never carried a banner, so I'm not gonna march in any parade saying do this, do this, do this. But if you're in therapy, you're seeking healing. That's what I'm there for. So I don't care what the wound is. Let's work on it. That's my. Can any priest do it? I think ministry is a gift, and I think to be able to be a good priest or good therapist is a gift of the Holy Spirit. I guess he or she would have. Well, there's no Catholic women priests, but anyway, the person would have to make a really strong self-assessment. Am I able to be that honest with myself first of all, and then with my clients or with my parishioners?
It's really interesting because I feel it's so fascinating for me, and I can imagine for a lot of people listening, it must be fascinating as well because you know I I feel like some of the most closed-minded people I've ever met are like, not necessarily people who are religious, but like for example, people who aren't even priests. Like you're a priest. You're someone who people go to and listen to, when they go to church. And for example, you will have someone who's like, "Oh, I can't even deal with like for example, a gay person because it's against the church." But then like, here you are offering healing to, the community, like people from that community. And is it ever, do you ever feel like you're going against your own faith in that sense?
No. I think people who are judgmental project a lot. So they're afraid of coming in contact with someone that they're like on some level, whether they know it or not, consciously or unconsciously, subconsciously. Very often, that's a person's weakness to see you in another person and hate that person because he or she reflects you. That's spooky, and that's what leads to terrorism. And that we just had the killings in Texas. I don't know the kid, but I know that what he projected was inside of him. That murder, that bloodshed, that was inside of him. That hate, that hurt, that pain was inside of him. I'm not condoning it at all, because the proper way is the proper way. Hurting someone because I'm hurting is not the proper way. Hurting someone or a country because you want that land is not a proper way. That's selfishness and diabolical. And don't forget, speaking of diabolical, the devil is very strong. I mean, I believe in the devil. I don't follow the devil, but I think Satan is very strong. And Satan is very manipulative. Satan gets into the hearts of, quote, good people that make them blind. And they don't see justice. They don't see what's right. They don't see it from God's perspective. They see it from a judgmental, narrow-minded, satanic perspective. And therefore, they're self-righteous. They got who they think is God on their side. Not so much. Not so much.
So how do you feel? I think this is an interesting question. How do you feel about other religions? Do you feel like other religions are like just like, are they all sinners? Or do you feel like, because in Christianity, you talk about only believing in one God, and this is
Right.
like the way, but there is Judaism, which is not too far away from Christianity, but there's also like the Muslim religion. Like, do you feel like they're thinking the same thing, or like
I find the Catholic Church the most open church in thinking and acceptance than any other church. Okay, open. Okay. Now, with that said, to my non-Catholic world, we're all in this together, guys and ladies. We're all in this together, okay? I believe in one God. Now, most religions believe in one God, okay? Even the Hindus believe in one divinity that all of these other gods come out of, emanate from. Judaism, of course, monotheism, Muslims, of course. So part of theology, part of studying theology was ecumenism, studying the various world religions. I mean, we studied all the ancient religions. We studied Hinduism. We studied Islam. We studied all sorts of Christian religions, the historical, the Mormons, and all. That was because you can't understand what you don't know, and you can't speak about what you don't know because you come off as an idiot. Okay, so people who say all non-Catholics are going to hell, they're stupid. I mean, pure and simple. Who believes that? God doesn't believe it. You believe it. Well, I know who your influence is, Satan. Anything that divides people is not focused on God. So besides studying all these various religions in theology, I still read up on them. I'm a traveler, as you know. I travel. I travel the world. I like to travel. That was how I used my summers. So we've been in Egypt, China, Japan, Barabadur, Indonesia, and you just absorb the beauty of everybody's religion. You just understand it as you learn about it. I can't say I want to be a Hindu. I appreciate Hinduism, and I appreciate a Hindu practicing his or her religion. Judaism, same thing. All the various, sects of Judaism. I understand them. I may or may not agree with how they carry out their faith or their Zionist beliefs, but I understand them. Okay, and no, I don't condemn or believe any other religion. Even the atheists. I keep it in your little thing.
No, it's okay.
Even the atheists. I don't believe atheists are going to hell. Please. I think it's hard to get to hell. I think if a person has to really want to live hate to get to hell, live and practice hate to get to hell. First thing that comes to mind is Hitler. Okay, he practiced it. He really knew what he was doing. He wasn't only a psychotic; he was a well-educated person who knew. Well, he was, I think, Lutheran Christian in his background. So he knew what he was doing. He was just pure evil. He knew Judeo-Christian roots. He knew the origin of the Torah and Jewish customs. He knew what he was doing. He was, envious, jealous, insecure. There's a whole list of things. But no, I never dislike, or I don't use the word hate, a person for a different belief or different religion. That's insane. How can I be a believer in Jesus Christ and hate anybody because they think differently than I? It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Do you follow because the Pope, right? Do you follow the Pope at all? Or
yeah, he's my boss.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, looking back into history and seeing where popes have been. I feel like some popes, for a lack of better words, have been kind of sketchy. You know what I mean?
Like the Borgias.
Yeah,
yeah. And the Renaissance popes and late medieval popes. Yeah. Okay.
Do you think the Pope is the closest person to God?
No, I think you are. Every one of us is close to God. There's no distance between any one of us and God. The Pope is the head of the physical church on earth. He knows probably way more than I know of the church history and church in the world, but he's no closer than I am to God. However, because of his role as leader of this community, the Catholic Church, and the successor of St. Peter, first apostle, I respect him, love him, and listen to him. Okay, when I was in Rome last week, 2 weeks ago. I went to the audience. I was cheering with everybody else. I prayed with him. I clapped for him because he represents, well, we believe as Catholics, he represents Christ on earth. He's the, quote, the vicar, we call it. He represents Christ on earth. Is he Christ? No. He's like an arrow pointing us to Christ. And his teachings are important. But he's a human being. And this Pope, above popes in my time, have shown how his humanity. I mean, when he first became Pope, he's I think he's a troublemaker. He really is. I love him. When he first became Pope, and now think about it. You're surrounded by another 100 guys, and each of them has followers and I don't want to say servants, but assistants, and they wearing very, very expensive clothes, and they're being ushered in limousines to and from. He just became Pope, just got ordained Pope. They want to change his shoes. No, the shoes I'm wearing are fine. Well, when we want to give you, I don't even know the names of Italian shoes. Say Armani shoes. I don't know, because they're very special. They're only made for the Pope. No, I'll keep my own shoes. He had to go back to the hotel where he was staying the night before to pay his room bill. He got on a bus. Now, do you realize, I mean, okay, probably the Catholic Church is the wealthiest institution in the world. Probably. He got on a bus to go back to the hotel. I said, when that guy did that, he had my vote. Oh, he was my man. I mean, don't take it so seriously. You know, you're the Pope. And he does it. He takes his ministry very seriously, but he doesn't take it to the point where he's a megalomaniac or a narcissist or I'm Pope. You know, no, he is a good man and a very fine example of what a person should be, a person who loves.
Yeah, because I think it's so important, you know, and I feel like a lot of people from this podcast will get is that you're human as well, you know. And I feel all these figures in life, even in general. For example, an example that I feel like a lot of people could relate to, when you were a kid and you saw your teacher outside of the classroom. You know, you see your teacher outside of the classroom, and you're like, you have a life. You know what I mean? Like you're not just, you know, going home worrying about your students and coming back and doing the same thing over and over.
Well, let me tell you about, I keep that thought though. Let me tell you about my teachers, the Filipini sisters. I just told Sister Mary Beth this last week because I was up in Villa Walsh. We used to see them in the street. I mean, these are nuns, major habits, you know, it's Filipino habit, a very distinct habit. And they would go out in twos, okay? They were companions to each other. And they would go shopping. They would go on Newark Avenue and Brunswick Street and buy groceries and stuff. And we would see them. These are my teachers. I'd run over to them, and they were so loving, these women. And I'd introduce my friends. You know, we were naive as kids. We had the publics and the Catholics, public school kids and the Catholic kids. So some of my friends who were non-Catholic were publics. They went to public school. And they didn't know anything about the Catholic Church. Not that I knew much about their churches, but as a kid. But I would bring them over and introduce them, like, this is the Pasqualina, this is my teacher, you know. Very proud. And they had nothing like that. I mean, if they saw their teachers, they were men and women in ordinary dress who had lives. But my teachers were special, and they came into my world. And I showed them off. You know, maybe I still have a great rapport and love for the Maestri P. Filippini, the teaching sisters Filippini.
Yeah, I you probably saw like a different side that other people like didn't see. You know?
Absolutely.
And I think it's a beautiful thing because like even I look back into high school when you know, my music teacher, and I think I mentioned this in a podcast recently. My music teacher in high school, he was a lot like more of a father figure to me, and I had a very close relationship with him. He would always give me advice, and to be honest, like I never really saw him just as a teacher. I saw him as a friend. And I think like that went a long way, especially up until now, because I mean, I have a cell phone number, you know, I say hi here and there, you know, and it's been such a long time. I feel like I have to go back and like really reconnect a lot more. But, you know, talking about this, I just think it's really important because it's weird because I feel like you could tell too, as life is kind of progressing and we're getting like the younger generations coming up. I think like the faith, and people going to and moving to the church has kind of like lowered
Right.
throughout, like substantially throughout the years. And I feel like, I mean, me personally, and of course, you probably know more than anybody, but in my vision, it's a lot because there's a negative connotation towards a lot of the churches.
Absolutely.
And, as more groups come out, I feel like the view of extremism on almost everything you look at
Yes.
is
Yes.
is very tough. And I don't think anybody would, imagine like listening to this podcast and being like, oh, your priest said he would and not in a bad way. It's gonna sound bad the way I say it, but like for example, in therapy, like you could offer healing to any trans or gay or anybody part of the LGBT community, but emotional healing, and I feel like any gay friend that I would have, a priest maybe be the last person who would
regrettably,
think would go to for healing. But even not just to talk about faith, but just talk about looking at a priest as a human. You know what I mean? It's like, regardless of faith, because I feel like a lot of how I view religion, because I'm not necessarily religious myself, but I'm very spiritual.
Yes,
that's
I know
kind
that.
of how
I know that.
I've kind of moved on. But I don't think there's too much of a difference between the two. I feel like they're in one. And how I picture it a lot is, at the end of the day, the only person who could judge you is God.
Yes.
And I imagine whenever I pass, I'll probably, and again, this is just how my mind works. I imagine, walking into like a heavenly coffee shop, God's chilling over there at a coffee table, and he's like, so, tell me why you're going to heaven. And I'll kind of go into an interview and be like, listen, most of my life, I just tried to be as good of a person as I can be. And if this doesn't give me the pass to come into the heavenly gates, I don't know what does, I really don't know. And I feel like that's kind of how I think about it. And that's why I try to be a really good person and keep an open mind, and even trying to offer healing through, my practice or what I do. Yeah. And again, I think this spirals back around to, people going back to why the decline is in people who are going into faith.
Yeah, I think we should chat about that for a bit. I often tell people in Mass, okay, that you are the reason there aren't people in church. Okay, now I don't put them down, because we have to be apostles. Okay, Christ mandated that. We have to be people who welcome to bring in people to church. If I am black and white with my rules and my rules my way, nobody's going to come to that. I mean, we're in a very diverse, liberal society. Okay, kids. When I worked at DePaul High School, and I also did this at the university, our ministry, besides being in class for religion class or preaching on Sundays at the college, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday were days of service. So Mondays, we would hop in the van and we'd go to the nursing home. Another group on Tuesday would go teach at the developmental center. Another group on Wednesday would go to Eva's Kitchen and serve food. Every day we had a different ministry. And these weren't seminarians, these were just kids, not all Catholic either. I'll never forget one time. One girl said, this is developmental center. It's closed now in North Jersey, but the residents moved to other facilities. Her name is Barbara. And they used to go to the North Jersey Developmental Center and teach religion class. Now, these are very low-level intellectual people, not kids. They were all ages. They were from 70 to 12. Okay, so they would go. So the Catholics would come, and sometimes there were no Catholics. They didn't know what they were sometimes, but they would come to class because we would do activities. We would do coloring. We would tell stories about the Bible. We'd give them rosaries. We'd give them always refreshments. Food is the key. So one day, Barbara's a coordinator. Each group had a different student coordinator. These are all university kids, William Patterson University. Barbara calls me up. She says, Father Lou, she says, some of the kids in my class want to say the rosary. I said, oh, okay, I'll get some. So I called up friends from East Hanover. They used to make rosaries. I said, I need about 50 pair of rosaries. I had them by Sunday. Give them to Barbara next week. Okay, here, Barbara, bring these, give them out to all the kids. Then again, they weren't kids. We used to call them euphemistically kids. Next day, she comes back. She says, Father, I gave the rosaries to them, but I have a problem. I said, what's that? She says, I don't know how to say the rosary. I said, oh, my God, you never learned in grammar school? You never learned in, church? She says, Father, I'm Jewish. I said, oh, my God. I said, you are wonderful. I said, you're teaching these kids. She said, well, you needed help, and religion was the thing you needed help with, and some of the girls in my sorority and I got together and said, let's do it. So I gave her not only the rosary, how to say the rosary, but I was so blessed to know that what I was doing was on the right track. I didn't say, Catholics line up here, Jews over there, Protestants over. No. The doors were open. So that's what the faith is all about. And people who don't do that, I said Catholics, who don't do that, who aren't open to sharing what we believe with whoever comes down the pike, we're making a mistake. We can't be a door closed. We have to be a door open. And I think many years ago, probably 60, Pope John XXIII called his idea of Vatican II risorgimento, opening up the doors and letting fresh air in. Now, regrettably, it was also the 60s, a lot of liberalism, a lot of stuff going on in the world like we have today. And the church was segmented so often, not by individual priests, but as a society. That's a mistake, and we can't be segmented. We have to be open. Now, we're not going to change our theology, and we're not going to change our faith. I'll never say, only because I believe life is life, I will never say, pro-abortion. I'm sorry, I can't say that because I believe a child, unborn child, is still in the womb of his mother and a child, a person. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago, I posted a picture of my third cousin who's pregnant and of her son. He's in utero. And I posted it on my site because it doesn't look like an amoeba. It looks like a baby, okay, wrapped up in his mother's womb. So things, like I said, I don't preach what I don't believe. Nor do I preach, go protest and go burn down clinics. No, because it's nonsense. I don't believe that. I wouldn't preach that. So many good-hearted people sometimes are narrow-minded, and they've shoved people away from the church. That's why often I preach, you are the best and worst of teachers. When you leave here in church and you go to Mass, what happens between here and your home is very important. How you treat people, how you respect people, and how you pray for those people that you don't understand or know or don't even like. And you can pray for people you don't like. You don't have to like them, but you have to pray for them. So I don't know what the question was, but you got the answer.
The question, yeah. Basically, the question was revolving around like the decline of...
Yeah. Okay, let me tell you a story. You got the right one for stories, right? In 2 weeks, in June, there are people coming into the church and into ministry in the church, okay? So nuns, priests, brothers, and monks, or these are the orders in the church. In 2 weeks, Jerry and I are going to Ireland because the cousin of his that I met 6 years ago is taking her final vows in a cloistered order in Ireland. She was a nurse. She's probably in her 30s, maybe a little later. She taught for a while. And about 6 years ago, I met her on one of our visits, and she was talking about becoming a cloistered sister. Now, cloisters, sisters, are, the word means closed. They're in a convent. They don't come out into the public, okay? Their philosophy is order et labora, work and prayer. So their days are prayer, and some sort of work that they do around the house, maybe gardening, maybe I think they make hosts, but different orders, something to bake bread, different orders have different ministries. So we met her 6 years ago, and she talked about it. The following year, she entered as a trial period. It was like an internship. She stayed with them like 6 months. The timeline might be off, but she stayed with them a few months. Then they sent her out back into the world. Go get a job, work for a while, and then decide whether you want to live with us. After that period, she returned, and then she began. I guess they call it the novitiate, the preparation to becoming a full-bodied sister in the convent, in the cloister. This week, I mean, like I said, next month, she's going to make her final vows, and final vows are really, they're not arbitrary. It really is black and white. It's yes or no. That she is going to be dedicated to a life of prayer, and she's young and she's attractive, a life of prayer and working in that convent, and she will not go out of the convent. And that convent is in Galway. That the foundation is 700 years old. So there have been people there for the last 700 years. They're a community of maybe 20 women, and I've met all of them because I've celebrated Mass there, because each time we go back, she's in a different phase, and the sisters there have become friends, and Sister Colette is interviewed on my site, Friends of the Word. I got to give a little plug there, friendsoftheword.org, and you couldn't get a more wholesome group of nuns. I mean, people, women, from 40, maybe late 30s to 90s. Okay, so I'm saying that because there are segments in our society that are drawing people into religious life in less numbers, but more serene, more serious numbers. That these people made a decision to become a sister, a priest, a brother. A brother is another step in church roles, lack of a better word, and give themselves in ministry to the people of God. So that the numbers are less. I pray that the numbers are more intense. So there's a phrase in Italian, pochi ma buoni, few but good. So yes, we're not attracting a lot, and maybe we've lost, but see, they're never lost. But anyway, maybe they're not coming to church, but I have found so many non-church goers very spiritual, and you're one of them, very spiritual. I like to accept that with people, but because of who I am, my ministry, that spirituality for me, if I'm working with someone who's talking about those things, I want to build on top of something. Spirituality is part of your nature. I want to share with you where my spirituality has led me into really knowing God in prayer. And I don't have a corner on the market, so it's not me and God against the world, but knowing God and having a strong relationship with God, His saints, and the Mother of Jesus, Mary. That comes through experience and education, like a little bit of everything. So on top of spiritual, so we're all spiritual, okay, but there are classifications of spirituality.
Yeah, I think for sure, I think it's weird. I think why I became so spiritual, or even like why I kind of diverted from, like more of my CCD teachings, and away from just like the Christian church. It was a mixture of a lot of things. I think it was a mixture of seeing the extremism of religions, and but also seeing the beauty behind it. And I think when things are taught so black and white to children, it can affect them very roughly. And I think that's kind of an example of what happened to me when I was little. And especially like, because I'll never forget, I remember somebody in the church that I was at was just like, all gays are going to hell. And like you get that impression as a kid. And then I think around when I was in my mid-teens is when I first started first having friends who were coming out, and I was thinking to myself, like, well, he doesn't do anything bad. He's just likes people of the same gender, and I never saw anything wrong with that. And for me, and again, this is towards the extreme point of view, where it's like, well, if this man lives the rest of his life doing nothing but good, and the only sin he ever really committed, well, I mean, everybody does in reality, sin or whatever, but
yeah,
just in this example, like, does as much sin as anybody, a regular person does, or any churchgoer does. And if just for the reason that he likes the same gender, he's going to hell. Like, I can never see that. And a lot of the priests that I grew up with, obviously I'm over here, I'm a question asker. I've always went against the grain, and especially
troublemaker.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. And whenever I would ask difficult questions, especially ones that I even think maybe at the time I wasn't ready for the answers, especially as a kid. But I think the answers that were given were always just like, very disheartening. Like, I'd be like, hey, so is there any exceptions for gays? And then it would always be like, we don't talk about that. And then for me, I was just like, man, like, like, why don't we talk about that? And and maybe it could have been a mixture of, like, maybe I was too young, but at the same time, it's like, if I'm ready to receive and learn about the word of the Lord,
Yes.
why am I not ready for these real world scenarios? Because I'm not in church all the time. I'm outside in the real world. And especially if you grow up somewhere in Jersey City, and where my family was based out of was Patterson. I grew up in Little Falls, but I'd be in Patterson every week. And I would see a whole bunch of different things and a whole bunch of different scenarios. And then also for a while I was dating a girl who was Muslim, and I got to learn a lot of her customs. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, she believes in her religion so much, and I believe in my religion, but at the same time, I was like, it got me to a point where I was just like, you know what? I think I just need to reevaluate myself for a second. And what I did was just like, I was like, I don't want to complicate my principles. And I think I need to live by, like, I guess what I thought like were pillars to myself. And I can't actually remember exactly how old I was when I kind of like came up with this for myself, but I was just like, the three words that always came up to me were peace, love, and unity. And it was like, and the three cannot coexist with each other. Peace being nonviolent, trying to be as peaceful as I can with everybody, peace within yourself, love, trying to give as much love as you can, and then unity is what brings that all together. And I feel like there's a lot of parallels to what I'm saying with the church, but when I think about those things, I'm just like, it doesn't matter whoever. I don't care if you're gay, I don't care if you're Muslim, I don't care if you're whatever religion, as long as you are living within those three things, like, how could you go wrong? And again, it goes back to where I'm about to see God at the coffee shop, and I'm like, listen, God, I live within these three pillars, and it's just like, can you like argue against it? Like can we have like a little discussion here? That's really what I think about. And I can't imagine like God being like, yeah, I don't know about that unity thing too much. I'm like, come on, like, you give me.
Well, let me tell you about those three words. These are yours, but those three words are a symbol of the Trinity: Father, Son, Holy Spirit. First of all, we believe one God, three persons. Okay? He gave himself to us in three ways. So there is unity in God. St. John in his Holy Scriptures talks about God. God is love. So God is love, you got that covered. Unity, you got that covered. And peace comes from God, who created all things. And go back to the scriptures talking about the Garden of Eden. Our belief is that God created, Garden of Eden is a theological metaphor for God creating beauty. Peace. God created peace. And he didn't create in war. He didn't create in hate. He didn't fight. This is not ancient Assyrian religion. The good gods against the bad gods. No, no. God created in peace. Okay, and if you weren't with Him in peace, you were out. So your three pillars are pretty Christian.
Yeah, and I think, like, like, I think even if they're similar to Christianity in a way, like, I also think, I think if your religion, and I think I haven't really read too much of the Quran or the Torah or any other religious scriptures, but what I do find similar within all religions is that they do preach a lot of those three pillars.
Yes, yes,
And I'm just
yes.
like, if I really would love, a place where we all can just like be one, and get together in that sense. And I think if the religious extremes are pushing us away, it's almost like it's doing the exact opposite, And I think it's a weird tightrope,
Right.
because it's like no one wants to be like, your faith is wrong, stop doing your faith and my faith is better.
Right.
And I think that's what kind of made me point more spiritual, because I'm like, you. And you were saying before, like a lot of these religions, they believe in one divinity, right? And see, some people might call him God, some people might call him Allah. I personally, I call it the universe, because so I call it the universe, and to me, I think that's I feel like it's a way where I could connect with everybody.
You got a lot of philosophy in there, but I want to touch on the theological part of it. In the documents of Vatican II, the Vatican II was an ecumenical worldwide council that was in the 60s, and it produced a lot of new educational documents and teachings for the church. One document on ecumenism talks about, we as Catholics believe Jesus is God, okay? Father, Son, Holy Spirit, one God. And we believe, because it's our truth. But other people, other religions, even atheists, are on the same path that they're following toward God. Now, they may not call him Jesus, but we're all on the same pilgrimage. And the Catholic Church recognizes all religions that are authentic religion, not something found up in a backyard someplace, but all religions as people who are on a journey, a pilgrimage to God. So that means the spiritualist, the Roman Catholic, the atheist, the Jew, if they're seeking truth in how they understand truth to be, we're all on this pilgrimage together. So they're not wrong, they're different. Okay, so I believe that my way is correct and right. I won't say your way is wrong, it's your way. But we're together because we're on the same journey toward the Creator, to God. So we believe in Father, Son, Holy Spirit. We believe Jesus became a human being to get us going. But if you are Hindu and you're on a journey, you're on a journey. If you want to fast to experience God and utopia, fast. Do what you do. But we're on the same journey. And it would be stupid to condemn you or ridicule you for your spiritual journey. We're all on it. As I said before, we're on this together.
Yeah. Lou, we're coming pretty close to the end of our podcast, but I do have 3 last questions for you.
Okay.
Okay. Number one's kind of, you could take it comedical or you could take it serious, take it however you want. I think if you look at the Bible literally, right?
Which we don't as Catholics. But go ahead.
Adam and Eve, started. That's where everything started, right?
Right.
Do you believe in dinosaurs?
You know what? I'm not a Darwinist, but based on my recent trip to New York natural history, yes, I believe in dinosaurs.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe in aliens came out from the up in the outer regions of creation and built the pyramids. But I believe in dinosaurs because I know who built the pyramids. I mean, historically,
Yeah.
I believe in history, so there's a place for dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then my second question is, you come from Jersey City.
Absolutely.
The whole point of these 30 days is having people who are from Jersey kind of represent Jersey. And I think you growing up in Jersey City is a perfect example.
The best.
There's so many people who leave Jersey who are just like, I don't want to stay here. They can't deal with the weather, or they just feel like it's too much for them, or, a whole bunch of reasons. You never know where you're going to end up. Why Jersey after all these years?
Why do I stay in Jersey?
Yeah.
One, I'm ministering in New York, so my time is mostly in New York, but my heart is in Jersey. Why Jersey? Family, friends, roots, who I am, how I was created, came from Jersey. So I'm never going to deny it. I go to Florida for certain vacations that I don't take in Jersey. It's a different state. I think Jersey has a lot to give. We've had a variety of gifts in the arts, in church, in politics, to the world. Good news, bad news. We had good guys and bad guys, good women, bad women. But we've made a mark in Jersey. So I'm glad your 30 days of Jersey? What is it?
30, June in Jersey.
June in Jersey is, God bless you. I hope you profit and bring a ton of people here to share their wealth with you.
I appreciate it. And then I have one more question for you. What would you say to yourself as advice? What advice would you give yourself while just the day after you did your first mass, let's say, like right after you graduated? What advice would you give yourself in that time if you could speak to yourself?
Keep going. You're doing good. That's it. That's exactly what I may have said, but I certainly believe it. I was on the right track. And like I said, I'm going to be ordained 50 years next year. Not once in those 50 years did I ever say, I did the wrong thing. I am happy. I'm happy I'm a priest. I'm humbled by being a priest, because you can't believe how many people come to you. They know you're a priest, that's all. They don't have to know your background, who you are, and they pour out their hearts to you. And that's very humbling. In what we call the Sacrament of Confession, people talk to a stranger. Sometimes I'm a stranger to them. It's so humbling, and it's a gift. It's a gift, and I don't deserve it because I didn't work for the gift. It's a gift that I'm working on improving in my life.
Amazing. Lou, thank you so much for coming through to the podcast. It's an absolute blessing having you.
Wonderful.
Please let the people know where they could find you. This is the time to promote your website, anything. Let the people know where they could find you.
Okay. Well, the website is friendsoftheword.org, and on there we have guests, and Beto will be one of my guests. We have homilies, we have special events, we have interviews with various people, and we'll have the interviews with Sister Marie Claire Marie in Ireland, and some other sisters that I taught. So interviews, special events, homilies, and prayer. So if you have a prayer request, feel free to contact me. It's Father Lou Scurti, SCURTI, @hotmail.com. And as a therapist, my name is Dr. Louis Scurti, and it's drscurti @gmail.com. And my website it's a long one. It's Dr. Scurti, Marriage and Family. That's my website as a therapist. So you can contact me every which way. Just Google me and you'll find me.
Great. And guys, you already know the business. AOCHO Podcast on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. You could find me BETO_music regularly on Instagram as well. Y'all can send me an email, aochopodcast@gmail.com. And thanks for...
One more thing.
Yeah, of course.
You realize when I was talking to the audience, I was talking to the light. I didn't realize the camera's there. But I feel good about that. I was talking to the light.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. I'm sure they won't mind. Lou, thank you so much. Let's get out of here.
Thank you, Beto.
Awesome. You did great. How did you feel about it?
Comfortable.
Great. Awesome.
100% comfortable. Awesome.
Real quick, let's just...
Let me try to mention.
Yeah.